So it looks like you have a big fan club here, Michael.
Hello, everyone. Thank you. Wow.
So,
hi, Judy.
Do I have to even introduce you? Well, I will anyway. Okay. So welcome, everyone, to my conversation with Michael Sfard. I was going to say one of Israel's most prominent international human rights lawyers, but I guess you could say the most prominent.
Don't say
okay,
that.
I'm saying it. You don't have to.
Don't.
Michael is cited widely, both in Israel and abroad, and he has brought many cases to the Israeli Supreme Court challenging the occupation and defending the work of Israeli human rights groups. Michael, it's a privilege to share the stage with you today.
Thank you very much. This is very kind.
So I want to start by referring to a very strong piece you wrote in Haaretz a few months ago titled, "We Israelis are part of a mafia crime family." You remember the piece, right?
It's in my blood.
Okay. In that piece, you argued that all Israelis, without exception, including left-wing Israelis, anti-government Israelis, pro-democracy Israelis, we are all complicit in war crimes in Gaza. In a conversation you and I recently had, you said that it was one of the most difficult pieces that you ever wrote. And you've written many tough pieces in my newspaper as well. So could you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, I'd like to start, like most speakers do, to thank Haaretz. And I want to say that in the last few years, I felt like this guy from, well, there was a 90s series, TV series, X-Files. And there was an episode there of a guy that wakes up in the morning, goes to work, and finds out that everyone is talking a different language. They use the same words, but they mean something else. And so he doesn't understand anyone. And sometimes I feel like that in Israel. And then I open Haaretz, and I realize that I have not lost my mind. So I want to thank Haaretz for being. My heart was broken twice in the last 2 years. Once was on October 7th, for obvious reasons. And then when I realized how my country, how my society is retaliating October 7th. And throughout the months of the war, I got to two very painful conclusions. One is that we, the state of Israel, are committing war crimes and crimes against humanity, and arguably acts of genocide. And that is not an easy insight. We have displaced millions of people without pledging to allow them to go back once armed hostilities are over. We have intentionally starved civilian population. We have disproportionately and discriminately killed tens of thousands of civilians in ways that cannot be seen as compatible with the laws of war, the laws of warfare. And we have provided complete impunity to an atmosphere of incitement to war crimes, to crimes against humanity, and to genocide. I'm involved in several cases in the Israeli Supreme Court trying to get some accountability for those hundreds of Israeli public figures, politicians, cabinet ministers, social media influencers, artists, those who call themselves journalists, who are inciting to commit crimes with complete impunity. So that was my first realization. And then came the second. And the second, I'll start with something former Prime Minister Ehud Olmert said here about what's going on in the West Bank. I felt we have a new human rights activist here. I agree with everything he said, including the melody and the tone and the volume. I just want to add to that, settler violence is state violence. Settler violence is receiving the tailwind and the assistance of the state, and many times soldiers and settlers commit the crimes together. And when it comes to Gaza and to the atrocities that I realized my society is committing, it took time, but I again realized something, and that was almost an identity crisis. That it's not Netanyahu or Ben Gvir or Smotrich or the settlers that are committing the crimes that are annihilating the Gaza Strip. Annihilation of the Gaza Strip is an all-Israeli project. And we have not heard one word from the representatives of labor organizations, of teachers, when the whole education system of Gaza was turned into rubble. We haven't heard anything from the Israeli Medical Association when all the medical infrastructure in Gaza was annihilated, was evaporated. We haven't heard anything from the Israeli Bar Association when Israel has turned its prisons into a chain of torture facilities, or when it banned Palestinian prisoners from getting visits from the Red Cross. So then I came to this conclusion, and it was a very painful one, and I asked myself, what does a decent citizen do when its society went so wrong? And writing this opinion piece was, for me, a complete personal crisis, because for the first time, I didn't come from those areas where Israel is one big colonial enterprise that was vicious from the outset. No, I have a different biography and different view of what Israel is. So stating in that op-ed that I think Israel must be isolated, that focused boycotts must take place in order to stop the atrocities, and that those soldiers who refuse must be supported, was a very difficult thing for me to do. And actually, I wrote this op-ed 2 weeks before it was published. It took me 2 weeks to actually send it. Not to Aluf Ben, but to the editor of the opinion piece section.
So, Michael, what happens now? Now, in your hat as an international human rights lawyer. A few weeks ago, a ceasefire was declared in Gaza, and it is more or less holding. But as you know, a year ago in November, the International Criminal Court issued arrest warrants for Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and then Defense Minister Yoav Gallant for alleged crimes against humanity and war crimes in Gaza. The International Court of Justice is meanwhile hearing a case put forth by South Africa alleging that Israel has committed genocide in Gaza. Now that the war is over, at least we hope it is, what do you expect to happen with these cases?
Well, someone before me on this stage said that he doesn't want to prophesize. My grandfather told me, never prophesize, especially not about the future. One thing, though, is definite. Justice and accountability will not be served through the Israeli justice system. That will not happen not only to the victims in Gaza, but not to the victims of October 7th. We are 2 years after the horrendous massacre of October 7th, with all the associated crimes that were committed on October 7th, and not a single person was indicted for any of the acts that were committed on October 7th. Because this Israeli government wants to create some kind of Guantanamo-style commissions and to introduce the death penalty. This will not bring justice. So, unfortunately, it's my career is all about trying to secure that the Israeli justice system will indeed serve justice to Palestinians and to those who come from disenfranchised communities. But my career is a complete failure in that sense. And my colleagues and I that were shouting from every hill that Israel is not providing any justice, that its justice system is failing time and again. In fact, it is not failing. It is doing exactly what the government wants it to do when it comes to Palestinians. So we have international tribunals like the ICC, like the ICJ. We also have universal jurisdiction, which means criminal trials in foreign state courts. And I can say, and of course the ICC is now in a very difficult situation where the American administration, the American president has imposed sanctions on the ICC because of the investigations into Israeli alleged crimes. And it's very difficult to see how that court can actually do the work in this environment. And we don't see the international community and especially the powers in the West, and especially Germany, who is a very important actor when it comes to international law and when it comes to the ICC. We don't see them giving the ICC the backing that it needs. But I want to say something. From my life as a lawyer, I know one thing. Injustice doesn't evaporate. It stays and contaminates the air as long as we do not do something about it. So it might take time, and we'll see all those cases where a soldier that did a selfie of him bombing some civilian object being issued arrest warrants in that country or the other. But eventually, if there will not be a serious organ that would provide justice for the victims, we will not be able to heal, because healing needs reconstruction in Gaza, definitely, but also in the ruined communities of the Gaza envelope and the Western Negev. It needs independence and freedom, which Israelis have and Palestinians do not, and it needs justice. And justice can come in many forms. It doesn't have to be through criminal proceedings and someone behind bars, but justice is part and parcel of healing.
We don't have a lot of time left, unfortunately, and I want to conclude maybe on an upbeat note. So I want to now remind you of another piece you wrote. This was about 10 years ago in Haaretz. You wrote a column that has since become famous and is often quoted. And in that column you wrote, "One day the occupation will end, and it will probably end in one fell swoop." And you went on to say, "One day the occupation will end because regimes of this kind are not viable. They are bound to fall because regimes of suppression, almost by definition, are unstable." Do you still believe this?
100%. I'm doubling down. So I want to say two things about that op-ed, which is still in the archives, I see. First, I didn't give a date. I didn't give a date to when it will happen. And I also said that I don't know whether it will happen peacefully or after a tragedy. What I do know is that oppressive regimes need constantly to increase the oppression. Oppressive regimes cannot stay put. They need constantly to impose more force, to be more cruel, to do more bad things. And that's what we've seen in the last 10 years since I wrote this op-ed. We're seeing the state of Israel, the government of Israel with its society. And by the way, I didn't say that Israelis are complicit. I said that they're responsible for all these crimes. And what we're seeing is that unless we end the occupation, we will need constantly to put more energy in maintaining it and changing ourselves during that process. Something that was seen one day as an aberration becomes the normal in the other day. So yes, I am positive that the occupation, and now I'll say also the apartheid, will end. It has to end, and it will end, and our role is to make all the effort that we can that this ending will come peacefully rather than in a tragedy which we are already living in.
Thank you so much.